All right, so let's take a look at what we're talking about when it comes to Chapter 2, Lesson 2. So we've talked about energy flow and how it goes through an ecosystem in Chapter 2, Lesson 1. Now we're going to look at three very specific cycles. Now, a lot of this information is not going to be in your book. It's a fifth grade standard that you didn't get to last year from your fifth grade books. So I would advise you to have some notebook paper because, once again, it could be on your assignments, could be on your test, and you'll be having a test here in a few days. So want to make sure that you get this information down, you understand it. So when we first start talking about water, that's what we're going to look at first. We have to understand that in our world, that water is found as a molecule. So we have elements that everything is made up of. Elements like hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, gold, silver, iron. Those are all basic elements that everything else in this world is made out of. We have over 200 different basic elements in our world. When it comes to water, though, it's not an element. It is two elements put together to make a molecule. So in this image, you see a red O, which is one atom of oxygen, two blue atoms of hydrogen that come together. So when we think of H2O, which is the scientific name for water, then we know we have two hydrogen atoms, because that's what the H2 tells us, for one oxygen atom, which is why there's no number with the O. So H2O, or water, is found all over our planet, and it's found in the three different states of matter. Once again, now this was fourth and fifth grade, so make sure that you write these things down. If you don't have space in your book, then please do it on a notebook. But we have three basic states of matter, and when we think of water, we often think of the liquid form. So a liquid state means that molecules are touching, they are connected, but they're connected loosely, and they will take the shape of whatever container they are in. We also have the gas state, which means that molecules are so spread apart that they do not touch one another, and they will expand according to whatever area they're in. So notice that this beaker has a stopper on it to keep the gas in. But if that stopper would be taken out of the beaker, then that gas would go out and it would fill up the area that it's in, and it would continue to spread out. So we have liquid water, and then we have the gas water, which is called water vapor, as you can see down there at the bottom. Then the solid form means that molecules are compacted tightly together to where it doesn't want to take its shape or doesn't leave its shape. It will not take the shape of the container it's in unless, for instance, I filled up this beaker with water and then I froze it, then it would be as ice, which is the solid form of water, inside of the beaker. But it's the same concept as having a rock and a chunk of ice. They're both solid. So when we look at the water cycle, which is our first cycle we look at on page 51, then we'll find all three states of matter. So some information that you need to know then, we're going to start with the idea that we're in the ocean or a bay, a river, a pond, or even a water puddle, whatever water is on the top of the earth. Now, this does not classify or work with our water that we have in aquifers, which are underground caves. So if you have a well, and you get well water, then you're going to get your water out of an underground cave. The water cycle does not apply to this until that water until it comes out of the aquifer, is used, and then exposed on the surface of the earth. So we're just going to look at the ocean. And in the ocean, we have liquid water. And water has to get to a specific temperature in order for it to boil. And the boiling process is what changes it from liquid into a gas. Now, water has a very specific boiling point. So if we know temperatures, that's 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which is our measurement that we use in the United States, but most places in the entire world, and when I say most places, I mean like 98% of all other countries, they use Celsius because it's nice, even, round numbers of increments of 10. So boiling point for water in Celsius is 100 degrees. We know that at the equator, where it's very hot and the sun is shining directly on the surface of the ocean, then parts of that ocean are going to get so hot that it does begin to boil the top layer of the ocean, and it's going to evaporate. So evaporation is the process of going from liquid into the gaseous state. And once again, the gas form of water is water vapor. So we're going from liquid water into water vapor. That's the process of evaporation. Now, as we should know, when hot air rises, right, because hot air balloons go up, right, the higher it gets in the atmosphere, then the temperature begins to drop. So when those water vapors begin to get into the cold regions of the atmosphere, they begin to freeze. They're going to freeze around dust particles and pollution that's in the air. And when they freeze and they connect, they have to once again get to a very specific temperature. It either has to be equal to or less than 32 degrees Fahrenheit, according to our temperature. You might notice that when we have outdoor recess, if it's 32 degrees or lower, we don't go outside for recess in the wintertime. We have to be inside unless it is above 32 degrees, because that's the temperature in which water freezes, and then some people can actually get sick from getting too cold. But water freezes at 32 degrees or lower, right? But in Celsius, that's 0 degrees. Remember, once again, when I said everything's in nice equal increments and measurements of 10. So at 0 is when water freezes. When they get up into the atmosphere and it gets cold and they begin to freeze and collect around dust particles, that's what we call scientifically condensation. So condensation happens and they form what we typically call a cloud. So cloud is frozen water vapor, right? So we've gone from the gaseous state into the solid state, and they begin to collect around one another and make these large clouds. When the clouds begin to get so big, right, the idea of ice and more ice being added in these real thin, fine connections, well, it's going to get so heavy that it begins to sink in the atmosphere. And the closer we get to the Earth, the more the temperature is going to warm up. So once it gets above 32 degrees Fahrenheit, or it gets above 0 degrees Celsius, so when it gets to 33 degrees Fahrenheit or like 1 degree Celsius, then it begins to melt, no longer a cloud. Now, depending on the temperature of the Earth at that time, will tell us the form in which precipitation is going to fall. Scientifically, we say that precipitation is going from the solid state into the liquid state when it comes to water, and it's going to fall back down to the ground. And often the first thing that we think of is rain. And that's probably because that 3/4 of our year we have rain, where only 1/4 of our year we usually have frozen stuff. But precipitation actually falls in 4 different forms. We either have rain, snow, sleet, or hail. Okay, so precipitation is going from the solid state into the liquid state, generally falling as rain, but it could take the form of rain, sleet, or hail. Excuse me, snow, sleet, or hail. The idea is once it's on the ground as snow, sleet, or hail, once the temperature warms up, it's going to melt. And it's then going to start the process all over again. So we have evaporation going from liquid to gas. We have condensation going from gas to solid. And then we have precipitation going from solid into liquid. We have all 3 states of matter represented in the water cycle. We can find all 3 states of matter all around us. You have water vapor wherever you are right now watching this video. There's water vapor in the air that you breathe. You could probably go to the sink and find that there is liquid water there, and you could probably go to your refrigerator and find that there's ice there. Right? We have all sorts of different continents on our planet, and we can find these 3 different states of matter in most of them. But when we talk about the water cycle, then we ask the question, well, what is the beginning of the water cycle? And I started with liquid, but that's not the beginning. Okay? So what we need to understand about cycles is there is no beginning, middle, or end. Around in our Earth, at all times, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 and 1/4 days a year, then we have all 3 of these stages happening throughout the entire Earth. So there is no beginning, middle, or end. It's just a continuous cycle that has happened throughout all of recorded history, and we can only expect that it will continue to do so. But water goes through all the 3 stages so that we can use it, and it will sustain the world and we can have a living planet. Right? Well, then we go into our next cycle. So if you turn to page 52, then we're talking about the exchange or the cycle between carbon dioxide and oxygen. And we've already mentioned this several times in class. We've just never looked at it as a cycle and as in one big group. But it's a general idea. When I look at this picture, I see the sunlight is, making things happen. And that thing that's happening with the grass, the flowers, and the trees is photosynthesis. And we said that photosynthesis can happen when it has sunlight, when it has water, and when it has carbon dioxide. And when the plants or the producers have those three things, then photosynthesis can happen, glucose can be made, and oxygen can be given off. So we have this constant exchange from all animals to all plants. Animals exhale carbon dioxide, plants basically exhale oxygen. Animals breathe in oxygen to survive, and plants breathe in carbon dioxide to survive. So all animals are going to be giving off that carbon dioxide, and all plants, all producers, are going to be giving off oxygen. And we have this constant cycle happening in our planet. If something happens and one of them is interrupted, then we have an issue. So imagine if we didn't have any plants. If we didn't have any plants, we aren't producing oxygen, and what happens to the animals? Well, all the animals are going to die, right? We have to have oxygen because we're an animal. But in the same way, if all the animals are gone, what's going to happen to all the plants? The plants are going to die as well because they have to have carbon dioxide in order to survive. So we have this constant cycle happening with the exchange between producers and consumers of exchanging carbon dioxide and oxygen. What's the beginning of this cycle? Hopefully the same answer popped into your head. There isn't one because it's a cycle. We have oxygen being released by plants all over our planet, and we have carbon dioxide being released by animals all over our planet. You can find them at all places throughout our world. And then our final one, if you turn the page again, then we see that we are talking about the nitrogen cycle. And nitrogen is one of those things that's needed by almost all animals and plants in order to survive, but how they get it is very different. So nitrogen is one of those things that when we look at how we get it, is we are surrounded by nitrogen all the time. It's around 85% of our entire air is made up of nitrogen gas. The problem is that you and I, when we inhale and exhale, right, our body recognizes one gas that's in the air, and that's oxygen. It takes it in and we exhale carbon dioxide because there's an exchange going on in our blood. But when we breathe in, 85% of that is nitrogen. And the thing that happens is our body then exhales it. We don't recognize it. We can't use it by putting it into our blood and breathing in and out, right? Only oxygen works that way, and carbon dioxide works that way to leave our body. So when we talk about needing nitrogen in order to stay healthy, we have to eat it, right? So we have organisms that put nitrogen into the soil through their roots or their waste, right? And then that nitrogen becomes what is called fixed. So we have free nitrogen all around us in the air, but then we end up with this free nitrogen, and it happens because these plants, they have this specific bacteria that's inside of them that absorbs nitrogen and then gets put into their cells. When we eat those plants, then we in turn get the nitrogen into our body. So we can't breathe in fixed nitrogen and be healthy. We must consume nitrogen by eating it. There's a constant, going back one slide if I can, there is a constant exchange going on between nitrogen that is fixed and nitrogen that is free. The free nitrogen's in the air. It's taken in by bacteria through different ways and into the soil. The bacteria then absorb it, they make it fixed and insert it into plants, and then we eat plants. The darker the green, the more nitrogen it has in it, so the healthier you are if you eat darker green vegetables. All right, so that is all the things that we're going to be talking about for Chapter 2, Lesson 2. You do have a 10-question assignment that is on campus, and then this assignment is due tomorrow, and I will give you your study guide. Some of this information will be expected to be known for your test, which will be next Tuesday. So if you have any questions, send me a message. If not, then continue to stay safe at home.